Well, I just got through listening to President Obama's speech at the DNC, and I will say this much. This man's level of propaganda is impressive. So some of the things he covered in his speech was Roe versus Wade getting overturned. He's just trying to blame Trump for everything, even though this is the same guy who was president for 8 years, and he had a chance at the beginning of his term to actually codify Roe versus Wade into law. He chose not to. And he wants to pretend the Great Orange Man is the only reason Roe versus Wade was overturned, when he could have prevented this years ago from ever happening. But it's the political football he wants the underlings to fight over. So look at us now. Roe versus Wade is gone, and now they're trying to blackmail the American people, saying, hey, if you vote for Donald Trump, he's going to pass a national abortion ban, even though he said multiple times he said he had no interest in banning abortion nationally. So that's propaganda number one. Number two, he went after all the Republicans, saying that they eventually kissed the ring of Donald Trump. Well, this happens with every election cycle. Everyone eventually kisses the ring. The only people I can think of in recent memory who didn't actually kiss the ring was Chris Christie and Ron Paul. Guess what? Those aren't Democrats, they're Republicans. Kind of reminds me when Bernie Sanders sold out his voters back in 2016, even though he got stabbed in the back by these people, and they did the same thing to him in 2020. President Obama is simply a wolf in sheep's clothing. He does an awesome job making you think he's actually for the average American, even though he's sold out to big corporations like the rest of them. Then he looked upon Kamala Harris's running mate, Tim Walts. I can get behind some of the things Tim Walts has done. I mean, if you give free school lunches to little kids, I'm all for that. But to pretend there's some kind of huge contrast between him and other Democrats, I mean, he's a fervent supporter of Israel. So all the people who want to vote for Kamala Harris thinking that she's going to be better on Gaza and all these things, I guarantee the policy is going to be the exact same as Joe Biden. Fervent support for Israel. It doesn't matter no matter what they do. I'm really curious if the ICJ actually rules it a genocide. Are we actually going to stop the weapons flow? Probably not. And then he talked about Republicans stoking the fears of the American people and trying to divide us. Aren't you the people who are saying that if Donald Trump wins, there's not going to be a democracy anymore? This is like the last election, like the final battle, like he says? Sounds pretty divisive to me. And he keeps telling us that the Democrats can actually deliver for the people this time. Okay, number one, I would kind of take issue saying this is a democracy. It's an oligarchy where the most powerful people just get what they want and the rest of us get screwed over constantly. This is what blows my mind when people are like, oh no, Donald Trump's going to dismantle the administrative state. Oh, you mean the administrative state that's made the American people's lives miserable? I don't know how these people think they're doing such a great job when the only thing Democrats do is sell out to corporations like the Republicans do. There's no real difference between these parties. They all agree on war. They all agree on trampling on our rights when it comes to the Constitution and NSA spying. Now that I got that out of my system, he did go into things in his speech that were substantive, like things like we actually need to increase the supply of housing, and that's how we're going to get housing costs down, not this dumbass plan where you're going to give people $35,000 on their first down payment to their house. That's not perversing the incentive structure of selling houses at all. And then the great Obama came out about his Affordable Care Act, which was just a giveaway to insurance companies, didn't even bother giving the American people a public option, and he wants to pretend that's somehow real change when it's not. The drug companies still run everything. Oh, you decrease the prices on like 5 drugs. Well, last time I checked, there was more than 5 drugs on the market, President Obama, which we're being price gouged every day for, the very medication people need to survive. But that's the Democrats, half measures, and they'll be like, well, we're better than the Republicans, we tried to do something. Actual change? Nah, we don't give you actual change in this party. Something I did kind of agree with in the speech, he did go on about like we need to make it more possible for people to go to college, while saying that's not the only path to actually make it in life. I mean, college degrees become more and more worthless every day. I have a 4-year degree in economics, and that hasn't done anything to help me in my life. I mean, yeah, the experience was nice, and I was drunk most of the time, but as far as getting like a 4-year degree, I think at this point, the only way college is worth it is if you get a master's degree or you're a doctor or a lawyer. Other than that, don't get into massive amounts of debt to go to college. And something my grandpa told me, and I do believe this is true, the key to life is education. However, you don't need to go to college to actually get an education. Something he did allude to was a right to a union, and I think that if we had more unions, there would be more of a balance with capital. But I can also see it from the capital's point of view. Hey, where were you guys when I was building the business, and now all of a sudden you guys form together and you want a bigger cut of the business? If you're an employer, you're used to having costs change all the time, and that should include the price of labor. I'm not for like a minimum wage, but I do think that workers should have a right to unionize, and I don't think you should be able to fire those workers, but I also understand capital's point of view being like, hey, what the fuck? You guys didn't even start the business, and all of a sudden you guys want to form together and shake me down more. And then he talked about how we shouldn't demonize one another. I don't know if anyone remembers back in 2016, if you were a Donald Trump supporter and say if you were in Hollywood or any of these industries, you were gone. So it's kind of rich for the mouthpiece of those people to come out and say, hey, we shouldn't demonize the other side. I mean, look at Disney. They fired multiple people who were Donald Trump supporters. Then he tries to distance himself from the foreign policy of the United States, saying, hey, we don't need to be the world's policeman. You literally were the world's policeman during your presidency, sir. Did anyone else forget about the drone war where he drone striked American citizens and it had like a 90% civilian death rate? Doesn't want to be the world's policeman, please. And near the end of the speech, he talked about Lincoln's address right before the Civil War, and he talked about the better angels of our nature. And this kind of stuck with me because he said something before he left office. He said, the presidency doesn't fundamentally change who you are. It just simply amplifies who you are. The only problem is Kamala Harris doesn't believe in anything, so I don't really know who she is. Donald Trump at least tells you he's an a-hole. So overall, very impressive, President Obama. You actually got me to think that you were on our side when he simply was a curator of the system. He did a great job of just maintaining the system that screws us over.